You know, friends, sometimes life has a way of surprising you. You're living your life, not bothering anyone, trying your best to be a good husband. Carrying the weight of daily routines like a donkey because she is your beloved, the one you'd stay up nights for, work from morning till night for. That's just the way it should be, right? My name is Nick, and this story is not for the faint-hearted. These are the kind of things you wouldn't even want to share with your closest friends because you start feeling like a complete fool. But let me tell you this, I realize that all of us, every now and then, play the fool, especially when it comes to love. That word that, like chocolate, sweetens our lives, only to later poison us from within. You understand what I mean? Let's start by saying that my life was absolutely normal, in the most usual sense of the word. I worked 16 hours a day, took on everything I could, while Laura, my, as I thought, loyal wife, always remained the perfect lady, as if straight out of a magazine. But it felt as if she already had another magazine on her shelf with which she went on dates. And me? I kept believing she was my soulmate until the very end. Ironic, right? A story fit for a million others, but this charming truth is exactly what we're here to discuss. I remember the day when she started staying late at work more often. Nick, it's just a project, I had to stay late. Her excuses always sounded sweet, like that French champagne I bought her for our anniversaries. But you know, that sweetness started to smell of trouble. I'm not an idiot, after all. Although, as it turned out later, I was a bit of a fool, just like all of us are when the ones closest to us betray us. So, that night I recalled all our shared moments, how we laughed, argued, made up. But, you know, laughter fades quickly when something suspicious appears on the horizon. Especially when your beloved suddenly starts disappearing, changing passwords on her phone, and saying she will be home late due to work. Well, I think you can already guess where this story is heading. Back then, I decided I needed to cool down the situation a bit. Do you remember the saying, if you can't sleep at night, start searching for the truth? Well, that's exactly what I did. Quietly, discreetly at first, to avoid drawing too much attention, because who knows, maybe it really was just a project, and I was needlessly dramatizing everything. But you understand, intuition is such that once you start listening to it, there's no turning back. So, I began my investigation. Well, investigation, I simply quietly opened her phone while she was in the shower. And do you know what it felt like? As if you'd been punched in the gut 5 times and couldn't catch your breath. Among all those lovely messages filled with plans for the future, there were those damned smiley faces she was sending to him. And you know what struck me the most? She didn't even try to cover her tracks. It's as if she had already decided I was so blind that I wouldn't notice anything. That night, I lay wide awake, realizing, this love we dreamed of together, this eternal fairy tale, was just a phantom that disappears as soon as you touch it. By morning, I knew one thing, I would no longer be the fool who believes in lies. I had to act, and act hard, or I would simply become a shadow in someone else's life. Thus began my little investigation. The first step was to find out more about this character. The thought of what kind of guy would dare to intrude on my life, my space, and my happiness ate at me. Well, you understand, sometimes we just want to bring the truth to light. You already know I couldn't leave things just like that and decided to get to the bottom of it. So, I almost didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed as if on pins and needles, thinking only about one thing, who is this hero who decided to lay his hands on what belongs to someone else? Because, in my opinion, everyone should have at least a bit of self-respect, and as I came to realize, he was seriously lacking in that department. In the morning, as Laura calmly got ready for work, I looked at her and couldn't shake the feeling that her face had somehow changed. You know, sometimes when you see someone every day, and then suddenly, it's like seeing them for the first time. Her smile seemed fake, her voice foreign, and her "don't worry, darling phrases were like a knife in my heart. She left, and I was left alone with my thoughts. At first, of course, the idea crossed my mind to just ask her. But no way. That would be too simple, right? I planned to approach this like a pro, like an agent, so that in the end, I'd have all the evidence in my hands. In those moments, my mind became like a labyrinth, with a plan hiding in every corner. And honestly, those thoughts distracted me a little from the bitterness eating me up inside. The first thing that came to mind was to start with her phone. The problem was, I couldn't just sneak into it again. Laura always carried her phone with her. But I had an ace up my sleeve. I knew her habits. Every evening she went to the bathroom and only took her makeup with her, leaving her phone in the bedroom. This gave me at best 10 minutes, sometimes even less. So, I decided to act as quickly as possible. For several days, I waited for the moment when Laura would go into the shower, so I could sneak into her phone again. Imagine my nerves, hands shaking, heart racing, with only one thought: what if she comes out sooner than expected? But not this time. She took her usual 10 minutes, and I got to work. This time, however, I was more cautious. I carefully went through her contacts but, as I expected, found nothing suspicious. The messages, mostly work, colleagues, girlfriends, looked normal. And yet, I managed to find one curious thing: a messenger app one hadn't seen before. This messenger was a new app she had probably downloaded very recently. There were no messages there, but for some reason, that icon felt like a trophy she had hidden for a rainy day. Well, I thought, surprise, you're not hiding from me. I decided to use one of those evenings when she, as usual, went into the shower, to make a backup copy from that messenger. If I'd already started this investigation, I had to extract the maximum. A few days later, I managed to gain temporary access to her phone. With the help of a clever app, I quickly copied data from that messenger to my computer. I won't go into technical details, but it didn't take much time, just enough not to raise suspicion. Finally, I had something that could be called a real lead. And that's when the real drama began. I expected to see some banal conversation with a slightly romantic signature, but things were much more complicated. The first message I found was, to put it mildly, spicy. Laura and this guy, whose name, by the way, was Marcus, exchanged phrases that made my fingers itch. He called her Sweet Rose, and she responded with, I can't wait to see your tulip again. Yes, that creatively, they avoided forbidden topics. But we both understand what they were really talking about. What was even more interesting was how they arranged their meetings. There were no specific dates or times, just obscure symbols, like under the stars at 8 o'clock. I realized it was some kind of code they came up with, as if they were spies and not two adults playing at love. But the worst part was that all their meetings took place when I was at work or doing something important, like planning our future together. This hit me like a knife in the back. In that state, I couldn't just sit and do nothing. With every new message, my blood boiled, and I decided to dig even deeper. I discovered a tool for GPS tracking and started to figure out where my beloved was going for these starry meetings. It was easy to do since her phone automatically left traces. I found the time and place where they met, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It turned out Laura and her perfect tulip were meeting at a local park, the very spot where we used to spend our summer evenings together. I was horrified. How could it have come to this? It's like tripping someone you taught to walk. I was crushed. But from that moment, a thought began to slowly take shape in my mind, one that was inevitable: revenge. Yes, I no longer wanted to be the silent, submissive husband she saw in me. She had no idea what I was capable of when my pride was wounded. And you know what? I already had an idea. Well, let's get started. From the moment I learned about these starry meetings and tulips with roses, I felt like a completely different person. There used to be Nick, the regular guy who worked, lived for his family, ready to carry Laura in his arms. And now, there was another Nick, the one who came into this life to restore justice and set things right. To be honest, revenge is a dangerous thing. It can pull you in like quicksand. But at that moment, I didn't care. I just realized that there was no way I could sit quietly in the corner, swallowing this betrayal. Nor did I want to. I decided I needed a plan. A plan that would make Laura understand that it was best not to play games with me. And believe me, this was only the beginning of my decisive actions. First, I decided not to rush. Instead of immediately confronting her, I pulled myself together with a calmness I didn't expect from myself. I understood that to carry out effective revenge, I first needed to gather all the information. And to ensure it was fresh, hot out of the oven. So, I had to activate all my spy skills to the fullest. First of all, I continued monitoring her messages and movements. Some might call it a bit paranoid, but, let's face it, when you've been betrayed, paranoia looks like a fairly healthy step. Each time she got a new message, I was ready. Her phone remained in the room for about 10 minutes, like clockwork. And I didn't miss a single one of those moments. Then, one evening, I sat waiting while she stepped out of the bathroom, entering the bedroom with an expression of complete calm on her face. It was that look, as if, my husband has no clue, and life is beautiful. And right then, I decided to take the first step to ensure her peace of mind would vanish once and for all. At work, I knew a couple of interesting tech friends who were pretty handy with IT stuff. I hinted to one of them that I had a small family conflict, and he suggested I install an app on her phone that would allow me to record conversations. Of course, I didn't go into details, just suggested that it was a very delicate situation. And you know what? It worked perfectly. From that point on, I had recordings of all of Laura's conversations, and there was plenty to listen to. Among them was her tulip, Marcus, who, as it turned out, was planning something far more serious with her than just stargazing rendezvous. They were discussing how he would like to move in with her, how wonderful they'd be together, and, naturally, how he understood her better than I did. Yeah, the irony. A man who basically crossed every line was still trying to claim the title of ideal partner. I sat with all these recordings, listening. At first, it was hard to hold back because every word, every phrase was like poison piercing my brain. But at some point, I no longer felt anger. There was another feeling, a sharp, unbreakable determination. I decided that this story wouldn't end for her so simply. The plan was simple but sophisticated. I needed to create a situation where she would feel my attention completely. And at that moment, an idea struck me. Do you know what hurts someone who betrays? Of course, when they're betrayed themselves. But I didn't want to simply replace her with someone else, that would have been too easy, and besides, it wasn't my style. I decided to arrange something different. First, I contacted an old friend who worked at the company where Laura once worked. They still maintained a friendly relationship, and my friend, John, quickly agreed to help. I asked him to arrange a meeting in the company for potential investors, and to invite Marcus and Laura as leading specialists in their field. The plan was to catch them together when they felt most comfortable. This was the first step in my little show. During all this time, I played the role of the perfect husband. Smiling, asking her how her work was going, helping her choose a dress for the meeting, telling her how stunning she looked. And all the while, I held every detail of this plan in my hands, like a conductor preparing for a grand finale. Hold on tight, here's where things get interesting. Every big game requires extensive preparation, and my operation of revenge was a plan with grandeur. She deserved an unforgettable finale, and I was going to do everything to ensure that her sweet tulip, Marcus and Laura herself would get exactly what they deserved. So, sit back, I'm about to tell you how I carefully thought out and prepared each step. As I mentioned, I decided to move slowly but surely. My goal wasn't just to stage a scene of jealousy or unleash my emotions. No, I wanted them to understand every moment, every word, and every step of their lives. I wasn't going to make their lives any easier, I was preparing a real performance. The first step of my plan was to prepare for that very investment event that we organized with my friend John. This event was the perfect cover. Since Laura and Marcus worked in the same field, they simply couldn't turn down the invitation to attend together. And I knew they would start to relax at that point, feeling safe and confident that no one suspected anything. Here's an interesting detail: I rented a room for myself in the same hotel where the event would take place. I booked the best suite with huge panoramic windows and contacted a few services that could help me with the organization of my plan. Well, you understand, cameras, special equipment that would allow me to see and hear everything happening in the room where the sweet couple would stay. Now, the fun part. I arranged with the hotel staff to have our room and Laura's set up directly across from each other. Yes, you got it right, I could comfortably observe them from my suite without ever leaving my room, and even set it up so they would never guess I was there. All of this preparation took me several weeks. I chose the very day Laura mentioned she'd be very busy and staying late at work. And naturally, I had to put in quite a bit of effort to make everything look as natural as possible. It's moments like these when you realize how important the details are. You know what's the funniest part? She had no clue that I knew her every move. Her face, a perfect mask as if nothing was wrong. And I played along with her game, looking at her with a smile and supporting her every step. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for the finale. By then, I already had all the recordings of their conversations, all the sweet messages, and, of course, those touching words of love, which I saved as my main piece of evidence. Admit it, when you have that kind of dirt, it's not just an investigation anymore, it's practically a work of art. The day of the event arrived. Laura, as usual, reassured me that she was going to work because of important meetings. I wished her a good day and, just to make sure she didn't suspect anything, asked if she wanted to go out for dinner in the evening. She, of course, quickly declined, saying she was too tired and that my timing wasn't quite right. And that's when I knew my plan was working like a clock. Once she left, I calmly headed to the hotel, checked all the camera settings, and adjusted the sound so that every word from their room would be crystal clear. Sitting in my suite, I even ordered myself a coffee and did so with such satisfaction, feeling like the victor in this invisible battle. A few hours later, they finally arrived, Laura and Marcus. Dressed in their finest, they entered the hotel, laughing, whispering sweet nothings as if they were teenage lovers. For me, it looked like a cheap play, but I was waiting to see what would happen next. And the best part was, I was right there, so close I could have just walked over and revealed everything. But that wasn't part of my plan. I needed them to reach their climax, for them to not only confess their feelings for each other but also face their own mistakes. When they entered their room, I turned on the recording, and the first thing I heard was quiet whispering. Laura said something like, "Finally, we're together, without that fool who doesn't even know I'm here." Marcus replied that they were meant to be together, and that this was their special moment. The moment didn't last long. After 20 minutes, I decided to make my first move and sent her a message with a recording of their conversations. You can imagine her face when she began listening to that recording. She just froze. Marcus didn't understand what was going on, and with each passing second of listening, Laura's face grew paler. So here we were, at the climax of the story. I sat in my suite with a cup of coffee, enjoying the show that I had put together myself. Have you ever heard the expression, "Revenge is a dish best served cold"? Well, my revenge right now was one of those delicacies. It was unfolding slowly, like a high-class play where every move had been meticulously planned. As soon as Laura opened the message with the recording of their conversations, her face turned ghostly white. I saw this through the camera, and it was a sight worth all my efforts. Her eyes widened, her hands trembled, and her face suddenly transformed into the one I saw every day, but now with a completely different expression. Marcus, whom she lovingly called Tulip, sat beside her, staring at her in complete confusion. His face was priceless, a mix of naivety and bewilderment, as if he had become an unwitting witness but didn't fully understand to what. "So, what did I send?" It was a message containing the juiciest parts of their conversations, about the special tulip, all their rendezvous, and how they'd mocked me, thinking I was the fool who would never suspect anything. You know, there's something special about watching secrets unfold and people suddenly lose control of the situation. This was a moment that words couldn't do justice to. Marcus started questioning her, asking what was going on. Laura, looking like someone caught red-handed, tried to say something like, "It's not what you think." She desperately tried to convince him that it was some joke, that all of it was a coincidence. But her words had no effect, not even on herself, let alone on Marcus. This tulip continued asking her about the recording, clueless as to how it could have ended up on his phone. Honestly, watching this dialogue was stunning, like being in the center of a film, except there were no actors, just real people drowning in their lies and deceit. And at that moment, I realized it was time to up the stakes. My next move was to send a few more surprises. Photos and videos I'd collected over this time, while observing her and her Marcus, started appearing on her phone screen. These included photos of their meeting spot in the parking lot, screenshots of their messages, and, of course, some of their special phone conversations. I collected all of this like a real detective, and now it had become the perfect weapon in my hands. As soon as she saw those photos, she practically gasped for air. Her voice faltered, and she tried to explain, but each word was pathetic. Marcus was already moving away from her, with a look of disgust on his face. I saw how each of her attempts to calm him down, to make it seem like this was some mistake, backfired on her. And in that moment, I was glad I didn't barge in right away but waited for their reaction. So, there I sat, watching this play unfold and realizing it was time to add one last, final surprise. Because for Laura, this was like falling into a bottomless pit, but I needed her to feel every bit of it from start to finish. What could be worse than the complete revelation of all her little secrets at the worst possible moment? The next step in my plan was, let's say, spectacular. I prepared a short video message. But it wasn't just an ordinary video. I recorded myself sitting in the suite across from them, with a panoramic view of their room through the glass doors. I decided to make this video so that every frame would be filled with the same coldness and calmness I'd felt all this time. In the video, I said something like this: "Hello, Laura. Hello, Marcus. I don't mean to disturb you, but I thought you'd like to hear how things look from my side. To be honest, I spent a long time thinking about how to react to your little secrets. And I decided that a simple breakup wasn't enough because you two are truly a masterpiece in deceit and lies. So now you have the chance to see yourselves from the outside. Think about what the person you've deceived feels when he looks at you and listens to this nonsense. This isn't revenge, no. It's just justice." I knew these words would hit hard, but that didn't stop me. I sent this video to Laura right as she was trying to explain things to Marcus. And here came the best part: her phone rang, and as soon as she saw my face on the screen, she knew there was only more pain ahead. Her eyes widened, and her hands shook so much the phone almost slipped from her grasp. She didn't know what to say, and her face froze, as if she had seen the true face of the situation for the first time. Marcus also looked at the screen, and I saw his reaction through my own screen. In his eyes, there was surprise, anger, and something like disgust. I almost wanted to smile at this scene, but I held back to maintain the perfect picture. He turned away from her, and she turned away from him. Neither of them could look the other in the eye because they both understood, this connection, this love, was nothing more than a cheap cover for lies that had now fully exploded. But that wasn't the end. I still had one last card up my sleeve for the final blow. So, there I was, sitting in my room, watching Laura and Marcus's reactions. I still had a few final surprises prepared. You remember that saying about revenge being best served cold? Well, I had carefully thought through every step, like a game of chess where every piece was in its place, ready for a final checkmate. I wanted to make this last move especially striking. So, as they sat there in the room, unsure of what to do, I prepared my last message. But this time, it wasn't just text or a video. I decided to make it live, a video call. Naturally, they weren't expecting it. If you could have seen their faces when they saw me calling, you'd understand that this moment alone was worth all the time and effort I'd put into my plan. I pressed video call, and my face filled their screen. I was completely calm, while their eyes showed exactly the fear I'd been waiting to see. Laura almost dropped the phone, but Marcus seemed to have decided to show some bravery, something, I thought, he should have shown much earlier. He tried to take on the role of protector, placing his hand on Laura's shoulder. But his protection looked pathetic, and they both knew it. I spoke in a calm voice, almost in a whisper, making sure every word of mine would sink deep. "Hello, Laura." "Hello, Marcus," I began. They were silent, not knowing what to say. "I hope you're enjoying our little game. I warned you that I have some pretty good investigative skills, didn't I? But don't worry, I'm not here to argue or make a scene. I just want to share something so that you finally understand what true humiliation feels like." I paused, letting them take in my words, then continued, "Let's play a little game. It'll be a game of honesty. You both like to talk about honesty and trust, right? So, I propose each of you answers one question, answer it to yourselves, to me, and most importantly, to the life you'll have to build from now on." On Laura's and Marcus's faces, I saw everything I needed: fear, shame, and anger mingled with despair. I chose to give them a chance to confess. This was the last step before my exit from the stage. "Laura," I addressed her directly, "you always said honesty was the foundation of everything between us. Tell me, how do you look at that honesty now? When you destroyed every word, every moment, every promise? Don't you think it's a bit pathetic?" She said nothing, her eyes cast down. Her face was a mask of emotions, showing more than I'd ever seen before. Marcus couldn't bear the tension any longer. He flinched as if he were about to say something, but I cut him off. "And you, Marcus," I said, "you like honesty too, right? Tell me, how do you feel now, with all your honesty laid bare, and now that you've been caught by your own actions?" His face turned to stone, and I could tell he didn't know what to say. They both sat there in silence, staring at the screen while I continued my speech. I didn't yell or get angry, I spoke as if it were a regular work conversation. And this tone, this calmness, got to them more than any shouting or accusations would have. It was like a quiet verdict that didn't need any additional words. They sat across from the screen, and I felt the atmosphere in the room slowly tightening around them as if it were binding them with chains. My revenge was nearly complete, but there was one last touch left, the moment they'd realized that they'd destroyed everything with their own hands, that all their love, all this passion, wasn't even worth a single minute of our life together. And I was ready to lead them to this realization. Taking a deep breath, I continued, "So, what now, Laura? What do you and Marcus plan to do? Do you hope it will just sort itself out and you can start fresh? Did you think it would all go unnoticed? That you could keep living as if nothing happened?" She remained silent, and Marcus looked down at the floor. He didn't dare meet my gaze. It was probably the moment he fully grasped what he'd done. And then I decided to add a bit of salt to the wound. I looked at her and said, "Laura, did you know I'd suspected you for a long time? Did you know that all those late nights at work didn't sound particularly credible? Or did you honestly think I was that blind?" Her face became a near-perfect stone mask, and I saw her trying to hold on to whatever dignity she could muster. But each of my words destroyed that bit by bit. She looked cornered, like someone with no escape. And you know what? This was only the beginning. Marcus, this so-called knight who thought he'd won, now sat there in silence. And I turned my attention to him. "Marcus, you always seemed confident, right? Probably thought you could take what belonged to another and it would stay yours? But you know what? It doesn't always work that way. There are things you can't steal or buy, and we call those things trust. You can't purchase it, nor can you snatch it away. And that's why, my friend, you'll end up with nothing." I kept watching them through the screen, and I could feel how every word of mine was breaking them down. You know what? This was more than I had ever hoped for. It felt like the final movement in an intricate dance, where every step was performed to perfection. But I wasn't planning to stop there. I wanted to add a few more strokes to complete the picture. Laura, I addressed her again, you always dreamed of a good life, of luxury and comfort, didn't you? So, how are you planning to realize those dreams now, without my support? Or maybe Marcus here will step up. Maybe this tulip will cover all your bills and whims? But, I doubt that very much. Marcus looked at me with an expression that was a mixture of anger, shame, and despair. He tried to speak, but I stopped him, raising my hand. You're not in a position to explain anything right now, I said, maintaining my icy tone. You got exactly what you deserved, and, I'm even glad it turned out this way. Now you'll understand what real humiliation feels like. But this still wasn't the end. I needed this story to conclude once and for all, leaving them without any illusions. I knew that after this, our paths would diverge, and I would never return to the life they tried to destroy. One more thing, I added, smiling, but this time with a cold, ruthless smile. Do you remember our joint account, Laura? Do you remember everything we saved for our future? Well, now you can forget about it. I took every last cent, and now it's all mine. And you won't get a penny. Her face grew even paler. This was the moment she realized she hadn't only lost me but everything we had built together. Her perfect future had shattered in a single instant. She couldn't believe I had actually done this, and I saw her eyes fill with despair. Marcus, realizing his part in this story was also over, simply got up and, without a word, left the room. He abandoned her, and it was the best ending I could imagine. So, when Marcus left, leaving Laura all alone, I could see how everything was collapsing in her mind. She stood there, destroyed, with emptiness in her eyes, understanding that her world had just crumbled and that nothing remained but the dust of those fake dreams she had built on lies. She didn't know where to go, who to turn to. No more tulips, no more secret evenings, everything vanished, like mist under the scorching sun. I sat and watched as she slowly sank into this ocean of despair. Her movements were aimless. She grabbed her phone but didn't call anyone. She was in a panic, realizing she had absolutely no way to fix the situation. This moment was pure triumph, the pinnacle of my strategy, but at the same time, I felt something else awaken inside me. Not pity, no, I couldn't allow that. It was more like satisfaction, realizing that she had created all this herself. And in that moment, I remembered every year we'd spent together, every shared moment, when she'd seemed so loyal and reliable. If only she'd known then what all of this would lead to. But no, I had no right to think about that anymore. Instead, I took the last step to complete my plan. I picked up my phone again and sent her one final message to conclude our story. I hope you understand now that everything comes back in full measure. Every word, every action, everything leaves a mark. You had everything, and now you're left with nothing. It was a short message, but I knew she'd understand its essence. Laura read the message, her eyes completely empty. I even thought she paused for a moment to reflect on what had happened, on what had truly gone wrong. But I knew that deep down, she would never fully acknowledge her guilt, nor feel true remorse. It wasn't in her nature. When I finished watching, I felt no more emotions, just a strange, empty silence. Like after a raging storm, when the waves gradually calm down, leaving an odd tranquility. I turned off the monitor and decided to leave her in the past, where she belonged. So, after I sent Laura my final message, I walked out of my hotel room, leaving her in the past. It was like a symbolic step, leaving her there, in that comfort she had so desperately tried to obtain through lies. Now she could stay there alone, with all those empty promises we had once discussed. Of course, I didn't wait to see how she would handle it. I didn't care. I no longer felt any pity or sympathy for her. When I walked out of the hotel and breathed in the fresh air, it felt like the weight of her betrayal had lifted off my shoulders. There was a sense that I was finally free. Truly free. But the most interesting thing was that in that moment, as I'd finally finished with her, I felt a desire to change my life. After all, in essence, after all of this, my life was like an open page where I could write whatever I wanted. It was almost like a new beginning. Returning home, I decided to do a thorough cleaning. And not just ridding myself of Laura's old things but completely redesigning my space. I changed the furniture, the wall colors, even replaced the old carpet we had bought together. It was almost like a cleansing ritual, where you get rid of not just physical things but also attachments to people who betrayed you. And I'll be honest with you, this process was incredibly liberating. With every discarded item, I felt better and better. A week after that scene at the hotel, I received a letter, an official notice of the divorce I had initiated even before our conversation. Everything was ready, the lawyers took care of all the details, and now all I had to do was sign the papers. I knew Laura would try to talk to me again, try to re-establish contact, but I had no interest in wasting even a second of my time on that. As soon as I signed all the papers, I realized this wasn't enough to leave her in the past. I needed more. This wasn't just about offense or a desire for revenge, it was the realization that everything I'd gone through had given me an incredible experience and a new understanding of myself. And I was going to make the most of it. So, without thinking twice, I decided to start a new chapter in my life by setting goals I never would have set if not for this story. First, I decided to take up sports. I'd always thought there wasn't enough time for things like that work, family, and other responsibilities were far more important. But now, with everything changed, I began to value my time more. Every day, I spent time in the gym, and it became true therapy. With every workout, I felt stronger, not only physically but also mentally. It was as if I was rediscovering myself, becoming a better version of who I was. Beyond that, I started dedicating more time to my own interests and hobbies, ones I'd always neglected because of constant obligations. One of those hobbies was travel. I remembered that once, before I was married, I dreamed of traveling. Laura always thought that travel was a waste of money, that it was better to buy expensive things than to waste money on the outside world. But now I was free from that. And you know what? I decided to take my first trip to a place I'd always dreamed of visiting. My first stop was Iceland, a country that had always drawn me in with its nature, its grandeur, and, at the same time, its calm. When I stepped onto Icelandic soil, I felt as if I had finally attained what I had wanted all this time: freedom, independence, the ability to do what I wanted without thinking about anyone but myself. Maybe this sounds selfish, but when you go through betrayal and humiliation, you need to learn to value yourself again. Each day in Iceland was a new discovery for me. I spent time in nature, explored mountains, visited waterfalls, and enjoyed every moment. It was like freeing myself from all the negativity that had accumulated over the last few years. After Iceland, I realized that stopping at just one trip wouldn't be enough. The moment I got back home, I already felt the urge to travel again, to go farther, to new places and new experiences. It was as if I was trying to make up for all those years spent confined within four walls, limited by daily routines and obligations. I wanted to see the world, to experience every place, every smell, every culture I had once dreamed of. And this time, stepping off the plane on the Italian coast, I knew I could finally allow myself to feel completely free. Venice, Florence, Rome. I traveled everywhere, as if seeing the world from a new perspective. And you know what was the most interesting? Each city, each new street revealed something that I had never even considered before. One day, while wandering through the streets of Rome, I stumbled upon an old bookstore. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of old books filled me with a sense of comfort. I spent several hours there, flipping through the pages of books that held stories from people all over the world. It was a special feeling, like finding something I had been searching for. I picked out one book, old and a bit worn, but incredibly intriguing, and decided to buy it as a keepsake of that day. This little treasure became a symbol of a new chapter in my life. Now I was preserving not just things but emotions and impressions. The more I traveled, the more often I found myself thinking that the past was far behind me. I no longer thought about betrayal, about the bitterness that had plagued me after the breakup with Laura. I felt how that weight was slowly evaporating, like it was dissolving into the air with every new country, with every mile traveled. The next stop was France. Paris, the city everyone talks about with admiration, but only after being there did I understand that it truly deserves its status. It's a place where history and modernity blend into an unusual, almost magical harmony. I wandered the narrow streets, drank coffee in local cafes where you could hear French music, and watched the people around me, living in their own worlds, unaffected by what was happening elsewhere. In Paris, I realized that the most valuable things in life are the moments you create for yourself, not the ones someone else imposes on you. Here, on the Champs-Élysées, among majestic architectural structures, I found something I had long sought, peace with myself. And it was a grand feeling, one that's hard to describe with words. So imagine this, Paris, the city of light, dreams, and inspiration, where I finally felt absolutely free from everything that had once weighed me down. I was ready to start a new life, enjoying every moment and not thinking about the past at all. And then, amid the crowd at Montmartre, I suddenly saw her, Linda. Do you know that moment when your heart suddenly skips a beat from surprise? That's exactly what I felt right then. Linda. My wife's friend, and, to be honest, a former subject of my fantasies. We used to be family friends, spending holidays together, sharing life stories. She was always energetic, cheerful, and very attractive, though I had kept that to myself. It was that forbidden desire that had always lingered in the back of my mind, and here she was, standing right in front of me in Paris, as if she had stepped out of my dreams. I had almost forgotten what she looked like in real life, but here she was, better than I remembered. Linda noticed me and, it seemed, recognized me immediately. She stopped, and a smile appeared on her face. That same flirtatious look I had seen dozens of times before, but now it felt like it was from another dimension. We stared at each other for a few seconds before I finally pulled myself together and approached her. Nick? Is it really you? Her voice was light, with that familiar pleasant tone I remembered so well. We hugged, and it was a bit unusual. Our hugs used to be friendly, but now I felt something else, something that made me feel special. Linda, you won't believe it. What brings you here? I asked, trying to hide my excitement. I should be the one asking that. I just got here recently. Thought I'd clear my head, after the divorce, she said, and her gaze dropped for a moment. That word, divorce, caught me off guard, although, to be honest, it didn't completely surprise me. I had always known Linda and her husband had some issues, but I would never have thought it had gone this far. It turned out that her husband, like Laura, hadn't been faithful. And now, she too had set out on a journey, searching for new experiences and a fresh start. We decided to sit down in a nearby cafe and talk. Linda looked even more stunning than before, that same enticing smile, those same sparks in her eyes, and I suddenly realized she was no longer the inaccessible, forbidden dream. Now, things were different. We sat in a little cafe in Montmartre, sipping red wine and sharing stories. I told her about what had happened between me and Laura, and she shared her own experience with her breakup. We had a lot in common, but the most important thing was that we both needed this moment, to feel alive and desired. The evening flew by. Her every word, every gesture, every look stirred something in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was one of those moments when you realize life can make an unexpected turn when you least expect it. So indeed, things were just getting interesting. As we sat in the cafe, enjoying red wine and carefree conversation, Linda suddenly raised her glass with that same mysterious smile I remembered and said, "Nick, let's have some fun tonight. Let's do something wild. Just like old times, but without any limits." I raised my eyebrows in surprise, though deep down, I was thrilled. Such an offer from Linda was nothing new, she'd always been the one suggesting the coolest plans. But this time, everything felt different, more open and daring. This time, we were both free of any commitments. We left the cafe and, without wasting any time, headed to one of Paris's most famous bars. The place, filled with music and light, practically breathed freedom. Every moment there felt like a wild whirlwind that sent chills down my spine. Linda danced as if it was her last day on Earth, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. Her movements were smooth, energetic, like fire, and she drew everyone's attention around her. But her gaze was fixed only on me. After a while, we moved to another bar, then a nightclub, and kept going until we could barely keep up with the rhythm or even remember how long we'd been out. The evening turned into night, and the night slowly began to turn into dawn. We wandered the streets of Paris, laughing, sharing stories, and not thinking about anything at all. It was complete freedom, the very thing I'd longed to feel. When we finally reached her hotel, I felt as if I was in the best dream of my life. Linda turned to me, paused for a moment, and then, without saying a word, pulled me closer and kissed me. It wasn't just a kiss, it was an explosive blend of passion, energy, and long-buried desires. Her lips met mine, and I felt like everything I'd imagined was now real. "I've always dreamed of this, Nick," she whispered, looking into my eyes. "Even back when we used to hang out together. But back then, it was just a dream." She smiled, a bit bashfully, but there was that playful sparkle in her eyes. And then, as if by accident, she took my hand and quietly asked, "So, what do you say? Want to come up? We haven't finished this night yet." I didn't think twice. This night was ours, and I knew that by morning, it could all disappear like a dream, but neither of us wanted to stop now. When I entered her room, the atmosphere was quiet, almost a bit mysterious. Linda turned on a dim light, casting a warm and soft glow. We stood facing each other, as if weighing this moment one last time, understanding that this wasn't just an ordinary meeting but something more. This was a moment uniting all those unfulfilled desires that had built up over the years. She stepped closer, and I felt her lips on mine again. Our kisses became deeper, more passionate, and her hands embraced me as if afraid this moment might slip away. It was as if we had forgotten about everything in the world, leaving behind all worries, past relationships, and everything that had ever held us back. Linda drew me even closer, and we surrendered to this boundless whirlwind of feelings. Every touch was like a small explosion, igniting something deep within. I felt how she filled each of our movements with a special energy. Everything was so easy and natural, without any barriers or limitations. We didn't rush, savoring every second, and nothing distracted us from this moment. The night was long, but each of its minutes seemed like an instant to us. We felt each other in a completely new way, discovering unknown emotions and, at the same time, recalling everything that had once been left only in our thoughts. And as the first rays of dawn began to seep through the curtains, I knew that this night would become one of those memories that last a lifetime. When I woke up in the morning, Linda was peacefully sleeping beside me. Her face looked calm, and it was one of those moments when you realize that everything that happened was not only right but perhaps even inevitable. We both had gone through betrayals, painful divorces, and now, finally free, we wanted to enjoy this new beginning. I lay there, looking at Linda, and it seemed as if this was where our new story began, right here in Paris. She opened her eyes and smiled when she saw me. "So, how do you like the new morning?" she asked, playfully and coquettishly. I couldn't hold back a smile, and to be honest, I felt great. We decided not to rush to our own rooms and went for breakfast together at a little cafe Linda had spotted the evening before. Paris was waking up, and the city exuded as much romance as we did. After breakfast, we strolled through the streets, and Linda, inspired by our spontaneous connection, suddenly suggested, "Why don't we stir things up for our exes? Why don't we take a picture on the Lovers' Bridge and post it on social media?" The idea was crazy, but I agreed because we both wanted to do something that would highlight our freedom, our new feelings, and also leave a symbolic hello to our past. We approached the Pont d'Arts, the very place where lovers leave locks as a symbol of eternal love, throwing the key into the river as a promise that their love would last forever. It was the perfect place for our little stunt. We laughed, joked, and took a few photos that seemed to say it all: we weren't broken, we're moving on. We hugged, Linda kissed me on the cheek, and with that same playful smile, she said, now our exes will see that we found what they destroyed. I posted the photo on social media, and within 5 minutes, likes and comments began to pour in. We laughed heartily, realizing our revenge was symbolic but immensely satisfying. After posting our picture, we both realized that Paris had only been the start. It was as if that photo on the Lover's Bridge had opened the door to an entirely new life for us, one in which we could finally feel truly free from the past. Our photo quickly gained attention on social media, gathering likes, comments, and a lot of reactions from friends and acquaintances. Even our exes saw it, which, strangely enough, added a final touch to the closure we both needed. But this was far more than just a public declaration. This was a testament to our freedom, to the newfound life we were both stepping into. The next destination on our journey was Barcelona. We figured that after Paris, we needed a place where we could relax completely, immerse ourselves in the beauty of life, and simply let go. Barcelona was the perfect choice. The energy of the city, its architecture, beaches, and vibrant nightlife created an ideal atmosphere for us. Here, there was no room for thoughts about the past. Every day felt like a new adventure. In Barcelona, our days were filled with exploration, as we wandered down narrow alleys, discovering small cafes that served local delicacies and sampling authentic paella paired with Spanish wine. One night, we even stumbled upon a local festival that turned into an unforgettable experience. Among the joyful crowds, we danced, sang, and reveled, feeling like each step, each laugh brought us closer together. It was difficult to believe that just a short time ago, we had each been struggling with the aftermath of our past relationships. One of the most meaningful nights in Barcelona was spent on the beach at Barceloneta, where we sat on the sand talking about our dreams and what we wanted from life moving forward. It was a quiet, deeply intimate moment, and we both felt how much our paths, which had unexpectedly crossed, were helping each of us find new purpose. Linda opened up about how she had felt like an outsider in her previous relationship, and now, for the first time, she could truly be herself. I shared that I had always dreamed of seeing the world, but life and all the situations I had been caught up in never allowed me to take the leap. She listened to me attentively, and it became clear that what had started as a friendship was growing into something much deeper as each day of our journey together passed. After Barcelona, we decided that our next stop would be Rome. This was almost like the fulfillment of an old dream, as Linda had always wanted to see this grand city, rich in history and culture. The moment we set foot in Rome, I understood that this place was made for her. Linda was captivated by the Colosseum, the Forum, the Vatican, and everything else that makes Rome so unique. Every day was packed with new experiences and discoveries that we shared with one another, testing how we could understand and support each other in completely new surroundings. Rome became not just another stop on our journey, but also a sort of test for the strength of our connection. Spending every day together, exploring this majestic city, we both felt that something more than friendship was blossoming between us. However, we were both cautious about letting our emotions fully show, each holding back a bit, perhaps out of fear or uncertainty. I knew that Linda had become incredibly important to me, but I didn't want to rush things or push her into a serious relationship. She, too, seemed to prefer taking things slowly, not wanting to label what was happening between us. One of the most memorable moments in Rome happened by the Trevi Fountain. Tourists throw coins into the fountain, making wishes, and we decided to join in on this tradition. I made a wish for this moment to stay in our memories forever as a symbol of the new chapter in our lives, and that we would both find what we were seeking. Linda made her wish, and as she tossed the coin, she glanced at me with that familiar enigmatic smile that always enchanted me. It was a moment when I felt that our pasts were truly behind us, and ahead of us lay something entirely new. Our journey continued, and the next destination was Greece. We headed to Santorini, an island famous for its whitewashed houses, blue domes, and breathtaking sunsets. This place was designed for romance, and although we weren't yet an official couple, I could feel we were on the verge of crossing the line from friendship into something deeper. One evening, we stayed on the terrace of our hotel, watching the sun slowly set over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over everything around us. It was a truly magical moment, and I realized I couldn't keep my feelings hidden anymore. Linda sensed it too, and we sat in silence, looking into each other's eyes, understanding that no words were needed. Everything was clear, and this silence spoke more than any conversation ever could. I took her hand and quietly said, "I'm glad we found each other after everything that happened. I think we both deserve this." Linda smiled again, and that smile told me everything I needed to know. We hugged, and right there, on this beautiful island, I felt that with each passing day, our feelings were growing stronger and deeper. Traveling with Linda helped me find peace within myself, close the door on my past, and begin a brighter new chapter in my life. Now we both knew that it didn't matter how long our journey lasted or where we ended up, what mattered was that we were no longer alone. We had become each other's support, and this was the most valuable thing I had gained from this journey. By the end of the trip, when we were finally headed back home, I was certain that Linda had become more than just a travel companion in my life. She was my partner, someone with whom I was ready to move forward into whatever lay ahead. When we returned home after our journey, I felt that my life had changed forever. This wasn't just a trip, it was a true journey toward a new self and a new life. Linda had become more than just someone close to me, she was the one who had helped me reevaluate the past and open myself to the future. I realized that our meeting in Paris hadn't been a coincidence, it was the beginning of a new chapter that would go on to define the rest of my life. After our return, we didn't hide our relationship. Our photos from the trip, shared on social media, sparked a lot of discussion among friends and acquaintances. Our exes saw them too, and this, perhaps, was the final gesture that allowed us to completely let go of the past. We didn't do it to hurt anyone, it was simply a symbol of our newfound freedom and the fact that we no longer held on to old resentments. Linda became my partner in everything, in life, in work, in our plans for the future. Together, we began building new dreams, now shared ones. After resting from our travels, we decided not to stop there and considered the idea of starting our own business, one that would allow us to combine work with travel. We planned to spend our time not only together but also in places that brought us both joy. This was a connection that allowed each of us to remain true to ourselves while feeling supported and understood. This period became the happiest and most productive time of my life. Together with Linda, I learned that love doesn't always come the way we expect it to. Sometimes it appears after a storm, after betrayals and difficult trials. But when it's real, it heals, it gives new strength, and it inspires us to do more. My story, which had begun in pain and disappointment, ended in something I could never have imagined. I found not only new love but a person who understood me like no one else. Now, as I look back on this journey, I know that nothing was in vain. Every stage, every event, led me to this moment, to Linda and to our new life. The ending of this story may not have been what I initially expected, but it was, without a doubt, perfect. Together, Linda and I were building a future, and I was ready for whatever lay ahead. The past was behind us, and new horizons awaited, ones we were ready to conquer together. Thank you to everyone who's been with me throughout this story. I hope you enjoyed traveling this journey with me, from betrayal to new love and true freedom. If you liked it, please leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read your impressions and hear what you think about this journey. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to ensure you don't miss any future stories, which I hope will be just as exciting for you. And by the way, I apologize for any pronunciation errors. This story was voiced with the help of external services, and I'm still learning as I go, as I'm not a native speaker. Your understanding means a lot to me, and I'm always working on improving for you. Thanks again for your support, and I look forward to seeing you again on the channel.